sitting there going, oh my gosh,
Oh, me too.
how am I going to figure, do you remember this where you feel
I
like
do.
you can figure
You're
all
bringing
this
me
out?
back. I was like, I almost like would take a switch in my brain and click it off because it was too much to it didn't sink in.
Right?
I'd just be giving them lip service. Yeah. Because it was too much to take in.
Right. And that's on top of, again, your calls to insurance and your child seizing every day and trying to get a handle on the diagnosis and the treatment. And then, oh, hey, by the way, you've got to figure out the school and the IEP and this and that. And then you start to hear all these terms and you just glaze over, right? I mean,
it's too much. It's too much.
There should be a manual with a glossary of terms.
For
that
sure.
they hand you the
For
minute
sure.
you get this diagnosis. So I do remember one of the things I've been working on recently that I shared with you is trying to get a common list of resources, because through the TS Alliance, obviously, we have fantastic resources about where to go for a TSC clinic, where to go for surgery, what to do for treatments, what to do for the prevent trial, and all these other things. And then I just kept thinking to myself, why are families spending days, hours, weeks, months, years on this Easter egg hunt of trying to figure out where these grants and resources and therapies and waivers and all this stuff is? And I know some of it is state specific and some of it is nationwide, but I have really been trying to compile a list of resources because I feel like any day that a newly diagnosed family, or just really any family, wherever part of the journey they're at, and they need help, the last thing they have time to do is do all this resource in
you're
hunting.
Exactly right. And I think we haven't accounted for the fact that a portion of our population is going to have a disability. We're so focused on normal, on that very narrow road strip.
Right.
So we haven't written it down, and you're writing it down. Yeah, I totally love it because I've had the same idea in different ways as far as people that are TSC.
That.
But I love it that you've started it. So you started a resource list.
Yes, I started a resource list, and I thought, you know what? If I send this and it doesn't help you, okay, I tried. But if I send this and one thing helps you off this list or gives you an idea of, oh, I didn't even know that existed. Let me see if it exists where I live. It's going to help you, right? And it's going to help you to start to think outside of the box of, what are the questions to ask? How can you look for these resources? What can you find? Because there's something out there for everyone wherever they live. And if there's not, there are some national resources that are available that can be tapped into. And I remember one time, and I'm not saying I certainly haven't applied for and done every single thing, but I even remember there are some things out there. I remember one time there's a medical travel grant through the Epilepsy Foundation that someone had passed along to me. And I remember thinking, should I put in for this? And, I don't know if I should do this. And I remember when I called the lady to ask some questions, she goes, listen to me. You're rare because a lot of people don't have to travel with their child for help with what they have. So you should go ahead and apply for this. This was created for families like you. And I think that sometimes we kind of think that way.
Yes, we do.
And we do need to tap into these resources. It is something that is available and out there, and it's to help our families and our loved ones that are faced with TSC, epilepsy, autism, whatever it is.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I didn't even know I knew what Make-A-Wish was, but I didn't know that I could apply for it for my son. I had no idea of it that could happen. And it was just such a wonderful thing at a perfect time when, I didn't have a lot of resources to go on a vacation.
Right.
And,
well, and I think too, a lot of families think for those kind of fun, magical, special moments, I think a lot of families feel it's kind of a tug of emotions, right? Should I go for something like that? Should I not? But at the same time, when I look at Brynleigh and I ask her, what she wants to celebrate something, or she literally the only things that bring her true, utter joy, even like I mentioned, seeing her on those rides and doing different things. I mean, you have to try to stop with whatever it is, whether it's chicken nuggets at Chick-fil-A or ice cream or a toy or whatever it is. I mean, we also do have to take those moments to celebrate the little milestones, the inch stones, whatever you want to call them, or try to have times when you do find joy, because our reality is that this is kind of a long journey.
I think joy is hitting on that. You've got to try to find it wherever you can.
Yeah. And so these resources that are out there, the Make-A-Wish and things like that are on there, but also some information about seizure alert devices, seizuretracker.com, the seizure monitoring devices.
It's like a gold mine.
Dogs, and then it goes into all the other things like, travel assistance if you travel, outside of your state for treatment or for different research studies. I mean, and the list goes on and on. There are a lot of things out there: horseback therapy, music therapy, just tons of organizations and things. But I've tried to start compiling those so that I can share that list with other moms and other families so that they can tap into some of those resources nationwide and in their own state.
Now, are you taking resources? If someone wants to send you a resource, are you compiling that?
Yes.
So anybody that's listening that might want to send you. Now, do you have a focus as far as like, not getting too many resources right now or just whatever, send it to you?
Well, I think the thing is that some people have asked about a lot of state-specific resources, and I think that's where things get tricky because
I wondered about that.
Yeah, I think the goal is we can kind of compile a general list, and some of these things are going to be nationwide. And a few of the organizations that I mentioned, one being Casey Cares that's here in Maryland, but they do also flow over into Ohio and Florida and some other states. It just may be that certain ones maybe for certain states, but I think if you get really granular into the actual waiver programs in your state or an autism program in your state or something that's very state specific based on your state's funding, I'm not sure that we're going to be able to manage that and nobody can be the best person to know everything about that, and it changes, I think, pretty often.
For sure. Yeah, I think that's a good rule as far as keeping it useful and not cumbersome. Forward,
but I think it gives you ideas of what to look for where you live and the questions to ask when you meet other families. Hey, do we have this here? And then somebody in your area, maybe even your local ARC or, early intervention programs, then you can say, hey, another mom in another state told me about music therapy. Do you know that we have this in whatever state? And then you might start on a path of, oh, we do have that, and this is the best place to go, and here's how you get information. And
so they're almost conversation starters.
Exactly.
Yeah, I'm so thrilled to hear about these things that just are coming up through the woodwork now, I feel like, with people making connections and ideas, and it's great.
Yeah, because I think that's one way that some people feel like, maybe they can't take on all these big projects and big things.
Right. But feels
these are
good to do something.
Things. Yes. And this is a little way. You might have this tiny little nugget of information of something that you found along your journey that could be life-changing for somebody else. And, even the seizure monitoring device, I've talked to a bunch of families where they just didn't know that it was even out there or that it existed. And that it meant that, their child was sleeping with them in their room or their child wasn't able to even get back in their bed or whatever. And I think that for a family can be life-changing to even have that separation of space. And the parents needed that self-care of being able to have their bed back to themselves. And so they didn't even know that that was out there. And there are different organizations that help with seizure monitoring devices. And, maybe they're not FDA approved or they might not be something that your doctor recommends, but I feel like if it gives you a little peace of mind and it's something versus nothing, I think it's worth it to do what makes you feel comfortable to manage this in your own home.
Well, of course.
And make you feel safe.
Yeah, and then your stress level isn't as high, and therefore, the ripple effect for sure.
Yes, and also on the list, I do have some resources about respite and caring for the caregiver and some different organizations that, to also not forget the caregivers need to be cared for as well. That's certainly something that we a lot of times forget about.
Yeah, and that's another focus of, I'm trying to take the podcast that way with certain guests as far as, what would have been useful to you when you were, or what did you need to do to get back on course? Where has this taken you and how did you recover? Because I think that for some of us that are a little farther along, where there was more gap. So it became really more frustrating, more stressful, more anxiety. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Yeah. I love it. I'm thrilled that I think of you guys like the next generations coming up with, because you have these other resources that perhaps we didn't have. You're able to take that little piece of energy and put it into paying it forward. How have you managed as far as juggling work, home life, family, your support network? You said you had a really good support network. So
yes, definitely when Brynleigh got diagnosed and things changed with her, we had already made the decision that I was going to stay home with her, at least for the first year, because I wanted to be home with her when she was little. But then, and we knew based on how her seizures were and the journey to surgery and all of that, I mean, there's no way for her at the time. We didn't feel comfortable that daycare would have been. And I know some families They have to, and they have to do what is
Of
best
course.
for them. But
Right.
for us, we were scared because her seizures weren't so apparent, the complex partial seizures
Yeah.
that she was having. I mean, I would be at a party with her, and I'm looking at her, and Brynleigh could even be in another room. I must have some weird sixth sense about seizures. I mean, I would know in another room or just looking at her from behind. I knew she wouldn't even be really maybe moving that much. And I just knew, oh, she's having a seizure. And I'd be holding her even at a party or somewhere. And somebody would say, oh, isn't that cute? Like she's staring at this thing. And I'm thinking, well, actually she's having a seizure right now. We're literally having a seizure. So we just knew for us with the type of seizure she had, we knew at daycare or in other settings, we were not going to feel comfortable. And we made the choice. And it was certainly, I mean, financially and just, it's certainly been a struggle to be at home on
tough,
one salary. But
if you can work it out, that's great because
yes.
Yeah.
So the reason we decided that I would stay home was to just manage all of this, right? And so now I literally every day when I wake up, I just treat this like it's my career, you know, that it's my job, whether it's managing all the therapies and the medical and the insurance component for Brynleigh, but also to me, what fuels me and makes me feel like I'm helping and I'm giving back is to do this, to do the volunteering, to be able to fundraise, to do this advocacy, because my first job out of school was at a nonprofit organization, and I quickly realized they didn't pay that much and that it was a far commute into DC and all these things. And I thought, well, geez, I cannot do this forever. But I remember thinking, I do love this. And it ignites something in me that kind of fuels my fire for wanting to do this kind of career. And I remember kind of putting it on the back shelf and thinking, at some point down the line, I want to work for a charity or I want to work for a nonprofit. I don't know where it's going to be or what it's going to be, but I'll figure it out. Yeah. And then sure enough, TSC found me. And now this is just, it's fulfilling to me, and it just gives me, it's given me a drive and a passion.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. You know.
Too. Well, I just feel like I should acknowledge the effort that you've put in and the results that you've gotten. It's great.
Well, that's awesome.
And you were just Volunteer of the Year.
Oh my gosh, yes. I was
Congratulations.
So surprised. Thank you. It was so cool.
Yeah.
It's just such an honor and a privilege to do what I do for our community. And
so, yeah, I just
think it's so cool that we have such a neat organization that's been able to accomplish so many major big things for a little group. And I just feel like this has given me an opportunity to do all these things. And I have to thank my husband all the time, because literally, I mean, sure, should I be going back to work full time? Probably now. Well, we just had another baby, so I can't go back yet. Right. But at some point down the line, I know that that's not, I mean, I can't do that forever. But while I can, I think what kind of drives me to continue is that the times that I do have, I try to do these things because I feel like it's my way to give back. So
I think, and I think creative employment is going to be more and more of a viable option. It's got to be, as far as hours, you know, instead of all these commuting when we can do it at home. I mean, it's ridiculous.
Yes. And that's why I think, Jill, honestly, the podcast is unbelievably amazing. I think what you're doing is phenomenal. There was certainly a need for it there. And like I said in the story that I shared with you earlier, I think so many of these topics transcend to other rare diseases, complex medical issues, you know, and I think if somebody else hears this somewhere else that's alone, I think they're going to hear, I'm not alone.
You know, regularly enough, people pop up like my wife, this or that. Yeah. So it's beautiful.
Yeah. And I think you're ministering and giving back to in a different way. And I think it's obviously where the direction of technology is going. And I think that these podcasts, you know, you can be in your car or at home or even in a waiting room at a doctor's office, right? I mean, listening to this and getting something out of it that you need to hear in that moment. And I think that's what's really spectacular about what you're doing.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. It's a pleasure. I wouldn't say it's a pleasure all the time, because to listen to people's pain, and it's tough, but I feel as if it's a calling, I guess. And I think that, I don't know. I don't want to sound all woo-woo, but like you said, it's just faith. It's just putting one foot in front of the other.
Exactly.
I have no idea how it's going to end. I just got to go forward. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I think too, it gives so much hope to the newly diagnosed families. I mean, at this last event that we just had, we had from 6 weeks old to 65 years old. And when I told the story in DC on the Hill, you know, at our second Maryland Day of Advocacy and Awareness, that was just so, I don't know why it just struck me. And it just struck a chord with me that look at the span of how TSC affects all these different people that are here. And yet we're moving forward, and there is hope, and there are all these things coming down the pike. And it gives hope to the 65-year-old and the adults living with TSC, and to the newly diagnosed that are just been born and found out. And I just think that that's really cool in itself, that we have answers and we have treatments and we have options for wherever you are in your